I was sitting alone in the quiet of our living room, the kind of silence that feels heavy and thick, pressing down on your chest. My husband had just stepped out for a minute. He said he needed to run a quick errand, nothing that would take long. I watched the door close behind him, the faint click echoing in the stillness. The house felt emptier than usual, even though it was the same space we'd shared for years. I tried to distract myself, my fingers nervously tracing the edge of the coffee table, but my mind kept drifting back to the little things. His laugh, the way he always held my hand when we sat together, the quiet comfort of his presence. It was strange how absence could make you notice everything you'd taken for granted. Then, just as I was beginning to settle into the silence, the doorbell rang, sharp, unexpected, and urgent. My heart jumped. Who could it be at this hour? I wasn't expecting anyone. Hesitantly, I rose and walked to the door, each step feeling heavier than the last. When I opened it, an old woman stood there, clutching a small, worn purse. Her eyes were kind but tired, and her face was lined with years of hardship and wisdom. She looked like someone who had seen too much, but still carried a quiet strength. In her hand, she held a bundle of money, crisp bills wrapped carefully in a faded ribbon. "Are you Mrs. Thompson?" she asked softly. I nodded, still unsure what to make of this unexpected visitor. "Yes, I am. Can I help you?" She hesitated for a moment, then reached into her purse and pulled out the money. She said, "This is for you," she simply said. "It's from someone who cares about you and your family." I blinked, confusion swirling in my chest. Who could have sent this? Why now? And why there was stranger? The old woman's gaze was steady, almost pleading. "Please don't ask questions now. Just take it. It's important." I wanted to refuse, to send her away, but something in her voice stopped me. There was urgency, a weight behind her words that I couldn't ignore. I took the money, my fingers trembling slightly as I held the bundle. "Thank you," I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I meant it for her or for the mysterious person who had sent this gift. She smiled faintly, then turned and walked away, disappearing down the street as quietly as she had come. I closed the door and leaned against it, the bundle of money heavy in my hands. My mind raced with questions. Who is behind this? What did they want? And most importantly, what did this mean for my family? The house felt colder now, the silence deeper. I sat back down, clutching the money like a lifeline, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and cautious hope. When my husband returned a few minutes later, I was still sitting there, lost in thought. I wanted to tell him about the old woman, about the money, but the words caught in my throat. Something told me this was just the beginning of a story I wasn't ready to face yet. As he stepped inside, I looked up at him, searching his face for answers I didn't have. And in that moment, I realized that everything was about to change.
Life with my husband, James, had always been a delicate balance of love, routine, and quiet struggles. We weren't wealthy by any means, but we had built a life together, one filled with small joys, shared dreams, and the kind of companionship that comes from years of weathering storms side by side. James was a man of simple tastes, a steady job, and a heart that beat fiercely for our family. I admired him for his dedication, his quiet strength, and the way he always made me feel safe, even when the world outside felt uncertain. Our home was modest but warm, filled with memories of laughter and late-night talks. We had no children, but our bond was enough to fill the space. We shared everything, our hopes, our fears, and the little savings we managed to put aside over the years. Money was never abundant, but we made do, careful with every penny, always planning for the future, even if that future seemed distant and fragile. I was the trusting one in our relationship, the one who believed in the goodness of people and the power of honesty. I handled the household finances, balancing bills and budgets with a quiet diligence. James trusted me implicitly, and I trusted him. But beneath that trust, there were undercurrents I didn't fully understand, whispers of worry in his eyes, moments when he seemed distant, as if carrying a burden he couldn't share. Our financial situation was stable but tight. James worked long hours, sometimes taking extra shifts to make ends meet. I took on part-time work when I could, but mostly I managed the home, keeping everything running smoothly. We had a small savings account, a modest nest egg for emergencies or dreams we hoped to realize someday. A trip, a new car, maybe even a small renovation to the house. Despite our careful planning, there was always a shadow hanging over us, a sense that something was not quite right. James was secretive about certain calls he took on his phone, often stepping outside to talk in hushed tones. I never pressed him, trusting that he would share when the time was right. But the silence grew heavier, and I began to notice subtle changes in his behavior. He became more withdrawn, less willing to discuss our finances or future plans. Sometimes I caught him staring at the bills with a furrowed brow, his jaw clenched tight. I wanted to ask, to understand, but fear held me back, the fear of uncovering something that might shatter the fragile peace we had built. Around us, the world seemed to be shifting too. Friends and neighbors whispered about scams, family disputes, and people losing everything to greed and deception. I listened with growing unease, wondering if we were vulnerable, if the trust I placed in James and those around us was misplaced. Money, once a simple matter of survival, had become a source of tension and secrecy. I noticed how James guarded his wallet and phone, how he avoided certain topics, and how the atmosphere in our home grew heavier with unspoken worries. I tried to reassure myself that it was just stress, that we would get through it together. But deep down, a knot of doubt was tightening in my chest. I was the trusting one, the believer in honesty and goodwill, but the world was teaching me harsh lessons about caution and vigilance. I found myself caught between hope and suspicion, love and fear. The arrival of the old woman with the money was a jolt, a sudden, unexpected intrusion into our carefully managed life. It was a sign that the secrets we tried to keep buried were beginning to surface, and I realized that the trust I had so freely given might soon be tested in ways I never imagined. As I sat in the quiet of our home, clutching the bundle of money, I thought about James, the man I loved, the partner I trusted, and the keeper of our shared dreams. I wondered what he knew, what he was hiding, and how much of our life was built on fragile foundations. The tension between trust and secrecy, love and doubt was growing, and I knew that soon I would have to face the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Because sometimes the hardest battles are fought not in the open, but in the silent spaces between us.
The unexpected ring of the doorbell shattered the fragile quiet that had settled over the house. My heart leapt, a sudden jolt of adrenaline rushing through me. Who could it be at this hour? I wasn't expecting anyone, and the thought of opening the door to a stranger filled me with a mix of curiosity and unease. I hesitated for a moment, my hand hovering over the latch. The second stretched, heavy and slow, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Then, with a deep breath, I pulled the door open. Standing there was an old woman, her figure small and slightly stooped, wrapped in a faded shawl that had clearly seen better days. Her face was a map of wrinkles, each line telling a story of hardship and endurance. Her eyes, however, were sharp and clear, piercing, almost unsettling in their intensity. They held a strange mixture of kindness and urgency, as if she carried a secret too heavy to bear alone. She clutched a small, worn purse tightly in one hand and in the other a bundle of money, wrapped carefully in a faded ribbon. The sight of it made my breath catch. Money at my door? From a stranger? It was both a blessing and a warning, and I wasn't sure which. "Mrs. Thompson?" she asked, her voice soft but firm, carrying the weight of someone used to being listened to. I nodded, my voice caught somewhere between surprise and caution. "Yes, that's me. Can I help you?" She took a step forward, her eyes never leaving mine. "I have something for you. Something important." Her words sent a shiver down my spine. There was no hesitation, no small talk, just a directness that was both comforting and alarming. I wanted to ask who she was, why she had come, but the questions tangled in my throat. Without waiting for an invitation, she reached into her purse and pulled out the bundle of money. The bills were crisp, neatly stacked, and tied with a faded ribbon that looked like it had been handled many times before. "This is for you," she said simply, "from someone who cares deeply about your family." I stared at the money, my mind racing. Who could have sent this? Why now? And why through this mysterious woman? The old woman's gaze softened for a moment, a flicker of something almost like hope passing through her eyes. "Please, don't ask questions now. Just take it. It's urgent." I wanted to refuse, to send her away, but something in her presence held me captive. There was a sincerity in her voice, a desperation that made me pause. I reached out, my fingers trembling as I accepted the money. "Thank you," I whispered, unsure if I was thanking her or the unknown sender. She nodded, a faint smile touching her lips. "Be careful. Not everyone around you is who they seem." Before I could respond, she turned and walked away, her steps slow but determined. I watched her disappear down the street, swallowed by the shadows of the evening. Closing the door, I leaned against it, the weight of the money heavy in my hands and the weight of uncertainty heavier in my heart. Who was this woman? What did she know? And what was I supposed to do with this unexpected gift? The silence returned, but it was different now, charged with questions and possibilities. I sat back down, clutching the money like a lifeline, my mind a whirlwind of fear, hope, and suspicion. When my husband returned, I wanted to tell him everything, the old woman, the money, the warning, but the words felt fragile, like they might shatter the fragile peace we still clung to. Instead, I waited, watching him closely, searching for answers in his eyes. And deep down, I knew that this was only the beginning of a story I wasn't ready to face. Because sometimes the most unexpected visitors bring the heaviest truths.
The days after the old woman's visit were filled with restless nights and anxious mornings. The bundle of money sat on my kitchen table, a silent reminder of the mystery that had suddenly invaded my life. I couldn't shake the feeling that beneath its crisp surface lay a tangled web of secrets that someone wanted me to uncover, whether I was ready or not. I began my search cautiously, starting with the few clues the old woman had left behind. Her name, the way she spoke, the urgency in her eyes, it all pointed to something deeper, something connected to my husband's past. But where to begin? Who could I trust? I reached out to a few old acquaintances of James, people he had worked with years ago. Some were reluctant to talk, their eyes flickering with unease when I mentioned the money and the mysterious visitor. Others were more forthcoming, hinting at debts long forgotten, promises broken, and a shadow that had followed James for years. One name kept coming up, an old business partner who had vanished after a scandal involving fraud and embezzlement. Rumors whispered that James had been caught in the crossfire, his reputation tarnished by association.
but no one seemed willing to say more, as if afraid of stirring up ghosts better left buried. The more I dug, the more I realized how little I truly knew about the man I had shared my life with. The husband who had seemed so steady and reliable was entangled in a past filled with danger and deception. And somehow, that past was reaching out to me now, through the old woman and the money she had brought. I found myself caught between disbelief and fear. How could James have kept this from me? Was he protecting me or hiding something darker? The questions gnawed at me, eroding the foundation of trust I had built over the years. At the same time, the community around us began to whisper. Neighbors who once greeted me warmly now looked away, their eyes filled with judgment and suspicion. Friends who had offered support grew distant, their smiles forced and their words cautious. It was as if the shadow of the past had spread beyond our home, casting doubt on everything we had. I felt isolated, trapped in a storm of secrets and lies. But I refused to be broken. I knew that to protect myself and my future, I had to face the truth head-on, no matter how painful. With the help of a trusted lawyer, I began to unravel the financial threads tied to the money. Bank records revealed unauthorized transactions, hidden accounts, and a trail of deceit that led back to people I had never expected. The old woman's warning echoed in my mind. Not everyone around you is who they seem. The emotional toll was immense. I wrestled with feelings of betrayal, anger, and sorrow. The man I loved was no longer the man I thought I knew, and the family I had trusted was fractured by greed and secrets. But amidst the turmoil, I found moments of clarity. I realized that uncovering the truth was not just about exposing others, it was about reclaiming my own power and dignity. It was about setting boundaries and refusing to be a victim. The journey was far from over. Each revelation brought new challenges, new conflicts, and new fears. But I faced them with a growing strength, fueled by the hope that justice and healing were possible. As I pieced together the puzzle, I understood that this was more than a story of money and betrayal. It was a story of resilience, courage, and the unbreakable spirit of a woman determined to protect what was hers. And no matter what lay ahead, I was ready to fight.
The truth hit me like a thunderclap, shattering the fragile world I had been clinging to. What began as a mysterious visit from an old woman with a bundle of money had spiraled into a revelation so profound it changed everything I thought I knew about my husband, my family, and myself. It was late one evening when I finally uncovered the connection. The money was not a gift, but a warning tied to a secret James had buried deep in his past, a secret that had come back to haunt us both. Through a series of documents and whispered confessions from those who once knew him, I learned that years ago, James had been involved in a business deal gone terribly wrong. It wasn't just a failed investment or a bad partnership. It was a betrayal that had cost lives and destroyed reputations. The money the old woman brought was linked to that dark chapter, a payment meant to settle debts and silence those who threatened to expose the truth. But the betrayal didn't stop there. As I dug deeper, I discovered that the web of deceit extended into our own family. Someone close to us had been working behind the scenes, manipulating events to their advantage, using the past as a weapon to control the present. The realization was devastating. The husband I had trusted, the man I had built my life around, was not the man I thought he was. And the family I believed in was fractured by lies and greed. I felt a storm of emotions, anger, sorrow, confusion, and a deep sense of loss. How could James have kept this from me? Was he protecting me, or was he hiding from his own guilt? And who among those closest to us had betrayed our trust?
The old woman's visit took on new meaning. She was not just a messenger, but a guardian, trying to warn me before it was too late. Her urgency, her insistence that I be careful, now made perfect sense. This revelation shifted everything. The stakes were no longer just about money or secrets. They were about survival, justice, and reclaiming my life from the shadows that threatened to consume it. I knew I couldn't turn back. The path ahead was fraught with danger and heartbreak, but it was the only way forward. I had to confront the past, expose the betrayal, and fight for the truth. As I steeled myself for the battles to come, I realized that this was not just a story of loss. It was a story of courage, resilience, and the unyielding strength of a woman determined to protect what was hers. And with that resolve burning in my heart, I took the first step into the unknown, ready to face whatever lay ahead.
The weight of betrayal settled heavily on my chest, a constant ache that no amount of time seemed to ease. I found myself caught in a whirlwind of emotions: confusion, anger, sorrow, and a deep, gnawing sense of loss. The man I had loved, trusted, and built a life with was now a stranger cloaked in secrets. The family I had believed in was fractured, its foundation cracked by lies and greed. I spent countless nights staring at the ceiling, wrestling with questions that had no easy answers. How had I missed the signs? Was my trust misplaced, or was I simply blinded by love? The line between loyalty and self-preservation blurred, leaving me uncertain of where I stood. Trust, I realized, was a fragile thing, easily broken and difficult to rebuild. It was the thread that held relationships together, yet it could unravel with a single act of deception. I had given my trust freely, believing in the goodness of those closest to me, but now that trust felt like a double-edged sword, cutting deep wounds that bled into every corner of my life. Family loyalty, too, became a complex and painful concept. I had always believed that family meant unconditional support, a safe harbor in the storm. But what happens when family becomes the source of pain? When those we love betray us, the hurt is magnified by the very bonds that should protect us. I found myself questioning the boundaries I had set, or rather the boundaries I had failed to set. In my desire to keep the peace, to hold the family together, I had allowed lines to blur. I had tolerated secrecy, ignored red flags, and silenced my own doubts. Now those blurred boundaries had left me vulnerable, exposed to manipulation and harm. But amidst the turmoil, a quiet resilience began to grow within me. I realized that pain, while overwhelming, could also be a catalyst for growth. The betrayal I had suffered was not the end of my story, but the beginning of a new chapter, one where I could reclaim my power and redefine my sense of self. I reflected on the nature of forgiveness, not as a gift to those who had wronged me, but as a release for my own heart. Forgiveness did not mean forgetting or excusing the betrayal. It meant freeing myself from the chains of bitterness and anger. It was a step toward healing, a way to reclaim peace in the midst of chaos. Setting personal boundaries became a vital part of this journey. I learned that boundaries were not walls to keep people out, but lines drawn to protect my well-being and dignity. They were acts of self-love, declarations that I deserved respect and honesty. Establishing these boundaries was difficult, often met with resistance and guilt, but necessary for my survival. I also grappled with the complexity of love, how it could be both a source of strength and vulnerability. Love made me open and trusting, but it also made me susceptible to hurt. Yet I refused to let fear close my heart. Instead, I chose to love with wisdom, to balance openness with caution. Throughout this emotional journey, I discovered a deeper understanding of myself. I recognized my capacity for strength, my ability to endure and rise above adversity. I embraced the imperfections of my family, acknowledging that love and pain often coexist in complicated ways.
This period of introspection was not easy. It demanded honesty, courage, and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths. But it also offered hope, a belief that from the ashes of betrayal, something new and beautiful could emerge. As I moved forward, I carried with me the lessons learned, the importance of trust, tempered by discernment, the necessity of boundaries, and the power of resilience. I knew the road ahead would still have challenges, but I was no longer afraid. I was ready to rebuild, not just my life, but my sense of self, grounded in truth, strength, and hope.
The moment I decided to take back control of my life was the moment I stopped being a victim and started becoming a warrior. The weight of betrayal and grief still pressed heavily on my heart, but beneath it all, a fierce determination began to grow. A determination to protect myself, to reclaim my dignity, and to set boundaries that no one, not even my own husband or family, could cross. The first step was legal. With the help of a trusted lawyer, I began the painstaking process of securing my finances. We froze accounts, changed passwords, and put safeguards in place to prevent any further unauthorized access. It was a relief to know that, at least on paper, I was no longer vulnerable to manipulation. But the real battle was far more complex. It was emotional, psychological, and deeply personal. Confronting James was one of the hardest things I ever had to do. I remember the day vividly. I stood in our living room, the place where so many memories had been made, and looked him in the eye. The anger and betrayal I felt were raw, but I spoke calmly, firmly. I know what you've done. The lies, the secrets, the betrayal, it ends now. He tried to deny it, to deflect blame, but I was no longer willing to be silenced. You don't get to control me or my life anymore, I said. I'm setting boundaries, clear, firm boundaries. If you can't respect that, then you're no longer welcome here. That moment marked a turning point, not just in our relationship, but in my own journey. I realized that empowerment comes from standing up for yourself, even when it's painful. I was no longer willing to be a pawn in someone else's game. Setting boundaries wasn't just about keeping James at a distance, it was about reclaiming my sense of self. I started saying no to demands that drained me, no to guilt that wasn't mine to carry, and yes to my own needs and well-being. It was a slow process, filled with moments of doubt and fear, but each step forward was a victory. I surrounded myself with people who supported me, friends who listened without judgment, professionals who guided me through the legal maze, and even strangers who shared their own stories of resilience. Their strength became my strength, reminding me that I was not alone. There were days when the pain felt unbearable, when the memories of betrayal threatened to consume me. But I learned to breathe through the hurt, to find peace in small moments, a walk in the garden, a quiet cup of tea, a phone call with a trusted friend. I also began to rebuild my relationship with myself. I rediscovered passions and dreams that had been buried under years of sacrifice and pain. I took time to nurture my body and mind, realizing that self-care was not selfish but essential. Through it all, I held on to the lessons I had learned: the importance of boundaries, the power of self-respect, and the courage to face life's challenges head-on. I understood that empowerment is not about controlling others, but about taking responsibility for your own life and choices. The journey was far from over. There were still legal battles to fight, emotional wounds to heal, and difficult conversations ahead. But I faced them with a new sense of confidence and clarity. I was no longer the woman who answered that door to a stranger with a bundle of money. I was a survivor, a fighter, and a woman who had reclaimed her voice. And with every step I took, I moved closer to the peace and freedom I deserved. The fight for justice was neither quick nor easy, but it was necessary. I wasn't alone in this battle. The old woman who had first brought the money, her name was Grace, became an unexpected ally. She had her own reasons for stepping into my life, and together we began to unravel the tangled web of deceit that had ensnared my family. Grace connected me with others in the community who had suffered similar betrayals. Their stories echoed mine, tales of greed, manipulation, and broken trust. But more importantly, they were stories of courage and resilience. Together, we formed a quiet but determined force, united by a shared desire to see justice served. With the support of my lawyer and these newfound allies, I gathered evidence, confronted those who had wronged me, and refused to be silenced. The legal battles were grueling, filled with moments of doubt and frustration, but each small victory fueled my resolve. Slowly, the truth began to surface. The antagonists, those who had sought to exploit and control, were exposed. Their schemes unraveled under the weight of evidence and community scrutiny. The lies they had spun could no longer hide in the shadows. Watching their downfall was bittersweet. It brought a sense of closure, but also a reminder of the pain they had caused. Yet, justice was not just about punishment. It was about restoring balance and reclaiming what was rightfully mine. As the dust settled, peace began to return to my life. The house that once felt heavy with secrets now felt lighter, filled with the possibility of new beginnings. I found solace in the support of those who stood by me and in the knowledge that I had fought for my dignity and won. This journey taught me that righteousness, though often challenged, has a way of prevailing. It reminded me that hope can be found even in the darkest of times, and that standing up for what is right is a powerful act of love, not just for oneself, but for the community. Justice was not just a destination, it was a path of healing, empowerment, and renewal. And as I looked toward the future, I carried with me the strength of that journey, a strength born from pain, perseverance, and the unwavering belief that truth will always find its way.
Healing didn't come all at once. It was a slow, gentle process. Sometimes a quiet sunrise, other times a stormy night. But with each passing day, I felt myself growing stronger, more whole, and more at peace. The wounds left by betrayal and loss were still there, but they no longer defined me. Instead, they became part of the story of my resilience. I learned that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting or excusing what had happened. It was about freeing myself from the heavy burden of anger and resentment. Forgiving those who hurt me allowed me to reclaim my heart and open it to hope again. Self-love became my anchor. I began to treat myself with the kindness and respect I had always given to others. I celebrated small victories, moments when I chose peace over pain, strength over fear. I surrounded myself with people who lifted me up, reminding me that I was worthy of love and happiness. Rebuilding my life meant rediscovering joy in the everyday. The warmth of sunlight on my face, the laughter of friends, the quiet comfort of a good book. It meant setting new goals, nurturing old passions, and embracing the future with cautious optimism. I found empowerment not just in standing up to betrayal, but in choosing to live fully despite it. I realized that my worth was not tied to anyone else's actions or approval. I was enough, strong, capable, and deserving of peace. Though the scars remained, they were reminders of my journey, not chains to hold me back. I had faced the darkest parts of my family's story and emerged with a deeper understanding of love, boundaries, and the power of self-respect. As I looked ahead, I felt a quiet hope, a belief that life could still be beautiful even after heartbreak.
I knew there would be challenges, but I was ready to meet them with courage and grace. To anyone watching, I want you to know this. Your story matters. Your feelings matter. And your voice matters. No matter what you're facing, you have the strength to overcome it and the right to live a life filled with love, respect, and peace. Remember, standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Setting boundaries is an act of love, not just for others, but for yourself. And healing is possible, even when the pain feels unbearable. Thank you for listening to my story. May it inspire you to find your own strength, to protect your heart, and to embrace the hope that tomorrow can bring joy.